Why are people telling me Pokemon would lose to Yu-Gi-Oh?
Now, of course, this is no hate to whoever made this. I'm just here to set the record straight. Usually, I would have ignored this because, of course, Pokemon fans made the simple, Ash would be Yu-Gi in a fist fight, which I also disagree with. But because he's heavily downplaying Yu-Gi-Oh's cosmology a lot, I decided to give this a little whirl and see what his arguments are about. Like I said, this is no hate to whoever this is. I'm just here to set the record straight.
Like we see Yugi do Magical Cylinder, where he essentially reflects the attack back at the user with the same amount of damage. The issue is, it does not work in the Pokemon anime because we see greater examples of it not working. The anime Wobbuffet uses Reupload, which is a better version of Magical Cylinder because it reflects the damage back at you 2 times rather than the same amount of damage. And guess what happens to Wobbuffet?
So basically, you're inferring because a Pokemon has a better version of Mirror Force, that would just mean that it wouldn't work on Ash. That would just mean that Magic Cylinder is more effective because it can reflect attacks of monsters that scale high above that Pokemon, basically. That would just mean that the attack scaled higher than what the Pokemon can take and reflect. That doesn't really change anything at all. You can have a reflect, but it doesn't matter if you cannot tank anything that scales higher than that reflect.
Same Wobbuffet with his counters and Nurkos is able to deflect Giratina, a literal god, a reality-distorting god, as well as Articuno and the rest of.
So that would just corroborate with my argument that the attacks that was thrown at it basically scaled higher than what it could tank and reflect, basically.
Marushi is the god of light, which created the multiverse that they brought up within their video. And this is supposed to be the strongest thing that Yugi had on his arsenal. I'm going to show you how it's not impressive. Pokemon multiverse, or should I say cosmology, is infinitely bigger than Yu-Gi-Oh's. And the reason we know this is because there's things like the Mirror Cave. In the Mirror Cave, every one of these crystals leads to an alternate timeline the size of the universe. And in every single one of these, it leads to another cave infinitely, meaning an infinite set of universes. That's just one cave. One cave is housing infinite timelines.
None of this actually proves how Yu-Gi-Oh's cosmology is lesser than Pokemon's cosmology. All this proves is that the Pokemon universe is infinite 4D at best, and that would just get them to multiversal. Kazuki Tagashi basically stated that there are alternate worlds and parallel universes that are infinite in number. So that would just get the mortal universe up to infinite 4D as well, considering there's an infinite number of timelines. The same thing that the Pokemon cosmology already has. And his multiverse theory basically talks about how there is an infinite number of us. There are different versions of us in alternate timelines and parallel worlds, which exist in an infinite number. So that will just corroborate with my theory that it's an infinite number of timelines. There are also an infinite number of timelines inside the Dual Monsters realm in this skin right here, considering that each archetype is a timeline and each archetype has its own lores and stories that could also count as infinite timelines as well. However, that doesn't matter because infinite timelines would just get you to infinite 4D, aka multiversal, which is blatantly not compared to Yu-Gi-Oh! You can get Yu-Gi-Oh! To 12-dimensional with one simple scan, so I don't get how this gets ass above Yu-Gi.
Arceus, Palkia, and Dialga, all these godly beings are controlling concepts like time and space above these infinite timelines, meaning that they're transcending an infinite-sized multiverse.
The scan that you show here doesn't prove how they can control space and time on a conceptual level, and without evidence, I can just dismiss this with Hitchens Razor. And transcending the infinite multiverse, like I said again, is infinite 4D. That will just make them to 5D. That doesn't really change anything whatsoever, and that doesn't get Arceus past any of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Characters whatsoever. You can get the Egyptian gods Soundverse already due to them being the polarities of the universe. Polarities are something that are opposite each other, aka good and bad, like love and hate, yin and yang whatsoever. Things such as temporal and non-temporal, or spatial and non-spatial, will also be polarities of the universe. That would just mean that the Egyptian gods represent temporal and non-temporal, spatial and non-spatial at the same time. Of course, non-temporal is a predicate, which means they're not bound by time, which is also negating the predicate of temporal, which means that they are bound by time. This could also be a predicate for temporal dimensions and axioms, since this also works for spatial and non-spatial as well. And because there are temporal and non-temporal, the same for spatial and non-spatial, that would just mean that they're beyond any temporal or spatial dimension. And to be beyond any temporal or spatial dimension, that would just mean that they're above the concepts of time and space. That would just also mean that they are beyond spatial dimensionality, which would also make them outerversal. So a 5D being compared to an outerversal being is just not fair at all.
It was a conversation of speed because Ash is so fast, Yugi wouldn't get an attack off. They kept saying things like Doug Trio can move at light speed and Yugi could dodge light beams. And to Ash himself is above the creation trio, and the Ultra Beasts are stated to be as well multiple times the greatest threats in history, above comprehension, above logic, above everything. Yet Ash played with them like food in Pokemon Sun and Moon, and he is faster than all of them, including his Pikachu. These things are capable of traversing time, just like Dialga, who can move freely above the concept of it. So Tim isn't even getting to pull a card out because he's being blitzed by a 10-year-old boy.
First of all, you didn't prove how they are above the concept of time and space, so I can just dismiss this with Hitchens Razor. Yugi would also blitz Ash because to be outerversal, you're beyond the concept of speed, so I just make his speed irrelevant. Ash was never winning against Yugi from the start because Yugi outscales and out-hexes him in every single way. that battle really just nerfed him a bit to make it more fair.